Good afternoon, Namaste. A very warm welcome to the TSDSI Hall of Fame Awards 2024 award ceremony. I'm Bindu Srivastava. I work at the Secretariat and I'll be your host for the day. The program flow today would be as follows. We will have a welcome address and introducing the chief guest by Mr. Mohan Ram, our Director General. This will be followed by the award ceremony, and then we will release a white paper on quantum communications that has been published recently by TSDSI. We will also introduce recent technical standards published by TSDSI, and then we will have an address by Professor Paulraj, followed by a vote of thanks and a networking reception. So we start with the welcome remarks by Mr. Mohan Ram. So let me introduce Mr. Mohan Ram. Mr. Mohan Ram took over as Director General of TSDSI in April 2023. With over 30 years of experience in high-performance computing and high-speed communications, he leads India's efforts in telecom and ICT standards development. His extensive background includes pivotal roles in technology innovation and national missions, making him a key figure in driving India's contributions to global standardization. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bindu. So, good afternoon, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues and friends. It's an honor to welcome you all to this special occasion where we celebrate excellence and dedication in advancing TSDSI's mission. I am especially pleased to have Professor Arogyaswami Paulraj, a globally acclaimed pioneer in telecommunications. He has kindly agreed to present the TSDSI Hall of Fame 2024 award. So I'll start with the brief introduction to Professor Paulraj. I know that most of you don't require that. I know Dr. Paulraj, Emeritus Professor at Stanford University, is renowned for his pioneering work on MIMO, wireless technology. This foundational technology for 4G, 5G, mobile and Wi-Fi networks contributes over 5.5 trillion annually to the global GDP. And then Dr. Paulraj has received numerous prestigious international awards. Before his academic career at Stanford, he served in the Indian Navy from 1965 to 1991. And during this time, he led the development of the APSA sonar system. And he also set up 3 R&D labs in the government. And for his exceptional contributions, he has been awarded the Padma Bhushan in 2010. So on a personal note, I have been lucky to work with Professor Paulraj at CDAC Bangalore, where he made where he played a key role in advancing India's early supercomputing efforts. His leadership at CDAC Bangalore had left a lasting impact on us. Now we are honored to have amongst us leaders who have been shaping the digital future of India. We have Mr. Krishnan, who is likely to join, Secretary Mighty. Then Mr. Satish, the current chair of TSDSI, and Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy, the past chair of TSDSI and also the former director of IIT Madras. So the TSDSI Hall of Fame recognizes individuals for their significant contributions to technical innovation, institutional development, or TSDSI's global presence. The awards are given in 2 categories. One is Technical Excellence Award, which honors contributions to standards development and adoption. And then we have the TSDSI Champions Award, which acknowledges efforts in institution building, partnerships, and advocacy. A jury comprising of eminent individuals, including the past chairs and domain experts, they select the recipients. The winners of the TSDSI Hall of Fame 2024 award will be announced shortly by the chair of TSDSI. So thank you all for being here to celebrate this special occasion. And then now I hand over the proceedings to Ms. Bindu, who will guide us through the next part of the program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohan Ram. So as Mr. Mohan Ram has mentioned, we are shortly expecting Mr. Krishnan, a Secretary Mighty, to join us in the hall. We have Professor Bhaskar with us. esteemed dignitary, let me please introduce Professor Bhaskar. Professor Bhaskar obtained his BTech in electronics from IIT Madras in 1980 and his MS and PhD in electrical engineering from the University of California, Santa Barbara in 82 and 85 respectively. After working at AT&T Bell Laboratories for a couple of years, he joined the faculty of his alma mater in 1986. He served as director IIT Madras during 2011 to 2022. He was also a chair of TSDSI for a long time. Professor Bhaskar was instrumental in setting up India's own telecom standards development organization, TSDSI, about a decade ago. During his term as chair, Professor Bhaskar grew TSDSI from a startup to a vibrant STO, making its mark on the global stage. He also mentored key technical contributions, especially to 5GI, that came from IITs and CEVIT. Thank you very much, Professor Bhaskar, for joining us in the ceremony. Next, we have Satish Jamadagni, currently serving as chair TSDSI. Satish is currently the Senior Vice President and Head of Global Standards at Reliance Jio. He has about 25 years of industry experience in the telecom domain. He has earlier also served as Vice Chair of TSDSI. Satish is active in 3GPP, GSMA, and ORAN Alliance. Earlier, he was a co-chair of the Asia Regional Operators Group, Small Cell Forum, and was on the board of the International Multimedia Teleconferencing Consortium, IMTC. Satish has around 200 granted patents in the wireless and network domain and around 30 plus published papers. Thank you, Satish, for being with us. I would now like to invite the dignitaries, Professor Paulraj, Professor Bhaskar, and Satish to kindly join us on the dais, and Satish to start with the Hall of Fame Awards announcements. So we're delighted to know that Mr. Krishnan has now joined us in the hall. May I invite Mr. Krishnan also to join us on the dais? And while he's doing that, I'll give a quick introduction to Mr. Krishnan. Yeah, Mr. Krishnan is posted as a secretary in the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, since September 2023. He has earlier served as Additional Chief Secretary, Industries, Investment Promotion and Commerce Department, Government of Tamil Nadu during March 20 to August 23. Of the 1989 batch of the IS, he's also been Additional Chief Secretary in the Finance Department and Principal Secretary in the Housing and Urban Development and in the Planning Development and Special Initiatives Departments. He was a founder CEO of the Tamil Nadu Infrastructure Development Board. He has also served as a chairman of the 5th Tamil Nadu State Finance Commission. Thank you very much, Mr. Krishnan, for joining us. Back to Satish.
Thank you. So, TSDSI is celebrating 10 years of its existence, and a lot of effort has gone into getting this organization up and running in the last 10 years. And in fact, one of our big thrust into standardization was during 5G. We pushed 5GI, and there was a lot of learning, not much to gain on the ground, but then at least it was a huge learning which we carry with us when we now stand and look at 6G, which is just going around. Two key things which have come out with whatever experience that we have. One is when we started with 5G, there was a lot of, it was more of an experiential journey where the maneuvering is something that we did learn. That is one part of the story. But then, if you look at the global players who were earlier the so-called leaders of 5G, so-called leading the entire technology, the Western world leading the technology, I don't want to name companies, but then 5G has not necessarily succeeded in the market. That is very, very evident. And if you look at some of the other major forays from major organizations around the world, like Open Run Consortium, Open Run initiatives, and all stuff. Not necessarily successful in that sense. So when we look at our own experience learned from 5G, and when we look at 6G, and given the fact that the Western ecosystem, which was supposed to be the leader during 5G, has not necessarily delivered. I want to emphasize on this point. The Western ecosystem, which was at the forefront of 5G, has not necessarily delivered. And that is precisely where we stand. Strategically, that is a huge gain for us, advantage. We are sitting at a pivotal point where two things work for us. We are experienced, we are standing here, and we recognize the fact that the Western ecosystem has not necessarily delivered. And this has really caused huge financial, I wouldn't say problems, but then, it's a lost opportunity. If you ask a financial person as to what did you gain by deploying $20-30 billion on 5G today, if you ask a typical finance person, he would say it could have elsewhere been put into a stock market, which would have given you 30% results, or whatever results that is. That's the way they look at it. It's a lost opportunity cost. When we look at all these things into consideration, and we look at the fact that TSDSI today is steering at 6G early on, and the fact that the 6G pre-standardization so-called activities has not necessarily converged, we are at a good place in the grand scheme of things. The stars are aligned. The stars are shining at us. So this is a moment which we need to capitalize on. And in that context, Mr. K. Rajaraman, chairperson currently of International Financial Services Center Authority, but formerly telecom secretary, and we've interacted quite a bit during those days also, has been key and instrumental in setting one of the foundation stones where we stand today. One of the key stones which has led us to a place where we are, and we look at a sense of opportunity going forward to 6G. So I'm happy to announce that this Hall of Fame award is being given to Mr. K. Rajaraman, and this is a great honor for TSDSI. Mr. Rajaraman, thank you very much. So to provide additional information as to what achievements Mr. Rajaraman deserves to be talked about, I invite Professor Paulraj to the stage to please talk a few words about Mr. Rajaraman. Thank you.
Do I give the award now or later? Just give it this way. Mr. Rajaraman. So it's indeed an honor to hand over the award of the Champion Award to Rajaraman. So let me read out the citation. For his pivotal role in positioning India as a significant player in the global 5G and emerging 6G standards landscape, and for empowering Indian academia and industry, including MSMEs and startups, as well as research institutions, to shape and influence international standards through TSDSI. Very well deserved. You have a green plaque. So let me. I was writing some remarks down, and by mistake I sent it to Anthropic. Anybody knows about Anthropic? One of the large LLMs models, and ChatGPT, probably all of you know, Gemini, Anthropic, Llama from Facebook. I have a couple of Chinese models. I gave it to Anthropic, and it compressed it a lot. But let me just say a few words about Rajaraman, and about his impact, and then I'll talk more about it later. So, admiration spans continents, and also from Stanford University, 10,000 miles away. I always marvel at the achievements of Indian wireless ecosystem. So I wanted to mention the Indian Wireless Telegraphy Act 1935 defined wireless communications as follows: any transmission, emission, reception of signs, signals, writing, images, and sounds, or even intelligence of any nature by means of electricity, magnetism, radio waves, or Hertzian waves, without the use of wires or other continuous electrical conductors between the transmitting and receiving apparatus. This was the prescient definition of wireless 90 years ago, and it's still pretty much valid. Great respect for the bureaucrats who wrote it down. It's Krishnan and Rajaraman. 90 years ago, I mean, where are we today and where was the world then? So impressive. So I think I'll say more about the ecosystem in India later, but I want to, the Mr. Rajaraman's citation we read. So India, I've been watching India for some time, and my usual partner in crime is Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy. So I used to come here quite often, meet with the government, and also meet with other institutions. And so we've done a lot in the last 5-6 years, and I would highlight among them is really the setting up of TSDSI, and the fact that we are now from a point we were almost invisible in the standards effort around the world, 3GPP and of course ITU. We are now a key player, and a lot of that, I think a lot of that push came from Mr. Rajaraman. So, the world of wireless is heavily dominated by standards. It's important, standards are important in wireless, almost any telecom, because things have to interconnect. It's not so important, for example, in computing and so on and so forth. So wireless standards are very important, and India really had almost no presence, and so now we are a player. We have a long way to go, but we indeed a player, and we're here today to and personally to admire the contributions of Rajaraman. I will say more about the Indian ecosystem, and something else which I want to talk a little bit about is the tsunami that's going on in the United States. I sit at Stanford, involved with a couple of companies on the silicon AI chips world, and everything today in the United States is not in millions, not even in billions. It's in trillions of dollars. So a company like Microsoft took 40 years to go from 0 to 145 billion. 40 years, founded by Bill Gates. OpenAI went from 0 to 145 billion in 14 months. Anything you touch today is hundreds of millions of dollars. It is talk a little bit about where AI is going. The two countries dominate: United States and China, and so we need to join this incredible race. And so that's one of my missions in Delhi this time, is to try and talk a little bit about it. I'll do that later. Thank you very much.
Can I request Professor Bhaskar to come and speak a few words?
Good afternoon to everybody assembled here, and let me begin by congratulating Mr. Rajaraman on my personal behalf for the award that he so richly deserves. The period in which he was the secretary of the department, I of course have interacted with him. I have known him for many years because he is a civil servant from the Tamil Nadu cadre. So I've had interactions with him when he was running other parts of the government. But the 2 years that he was secretary of the Department of Telecommunications, that is from 2021 till 2023, they were sort of the years when a lot of the efforts we started 10 years ago, as Satish was mentioning, by the launching TSDSI, came to a head. There has been steady improvement of the ecosystem, which Professor Paulraj referred to over these years. Many leaders have contributed to it. But we reached a certain point because 5G was becoming a global standard, was going to be declared, and we were beginning to participate in that for the first time. We were not present before that for a 4G, 3G, or any of the other standards. So basically, some of you, many of you will know the history that we wanted we actually, put our stake on the ground by creating a new use case which focused on the Indian rural requirement. This happened in 2016, much before he entered this ministry, and that was called low mobility large cell. So people around the world sort of woke up and said, "What's this news? What's this coming suddenly from India?" and so on. It was a requirement. It was not a contribution to the standard, but it was a mandatory requirement that the standard which was going to be evolved had to meet. So you had to. So that the important learning was you had to focus on something which is new, which everybody else has overlooked, and that was the peculiar requirement of the Indian rural use case, which we were able to bring to the fore. Then we went about contributing to the standard to actually overachieve on the requirement. That the Indian rural use case requirement was watered down a little bit in the process of getting consensus. So we actually wanted to achieve the performance that we had intended in the first place, and we made a contribution from India towards that in the standard. And for various reasons, companies have their own reasons for supporting or not supporting something. It faced some opposition, substantial opposition, not substantial support also, but substantial opposition, and it was made only a optional part of the 5G standard. And in that period, we of course had increased our presence at the standardization effort. We also increased our presence in ITU. ITU, as you know, is represented by a sovereign. So we had to have a coherent story. We had to have the government, working in sync. It was a learning period for everybody. I think Satish mentioned about the fact that the main gain from this whole exercise on 5G from India was the learning. It was learning not only for TSDSI, for all the research groups that worked through TSDSI, but also for the government, what has to be done in ITU. Because government is different from the researchers, is different from TSDSI. How do you work in synergy? We have our own methods to evolve. Other countries have different linkages and work differently. So those learnings also went on, and it worked very well in ITU. For the first time, we were able to orchestrate this in such a way that whatever we wanted as the mandatory part of 5G, though it was not accepted in 5G itself, we were able to roll it out as a super set of 5G and called it 5GI. We sort of left it tantalizingly unknown what I stood for. It could be taken as India, it could be taken as improvement, whatever. So we left it at that, and that happened in 2021. So there was a period when it required that orchestration with ITU, in which Mr. Rajaraman's role in the department was very important in making it all happen. We were all on the phone, we were all discussing what needs to be done, we were learning, everybody was learning. But after that, the world wanted to know whether India was serious about 5GI, and the decision about a standard, whether it's going to be adopted by the nation, etc., is again a decision of the government. It's not a decision of the standardization body. So there again, government had to play a role to send enough signals that maybe we are serious about it, maybe we'll force it. And we are a huge market. What the government of India decides has a very big impact. So that led to a sequence of events where the world standardization groups, the companies all decided it's better to fold 5GI back into 5G, make it part of 5G. In other words, agree to those things which were not agreed upon in 2019. And we were able to actually in 2022 get consensus agreement with the rest of the world that whatever we wanted originally is back in 5G, and there's no need for a separate 5GI. All of this learning, all of this maneuvering, as Satish, nice word he used, I heard it for the first time. We learned how to do it, and we executed it in that period. Simultaneously, standards as Professor Paulraj said, standards are very important in telecom, but they are important only in as much as it translates into products and equipment and users. And simultaneously, I think the first moves towards having a substantial, enabling a substantial Indian presence in the telecom equipment, product design, development, manufacturing, and deployment space were beginning to take place. And there was something that's outside the scope of TSDSI, I'm just mentioning it here. The whole decision of the government of India to have a secure network for BSNL, to have the 4G deployment done with secure core and as far as possible secure RAN also sourced from Indian companies. This was a major decision, and that was executed in this period from 2022, 2023, and it's just about getting towards the end now. So that was also a very major part. It's nothing to do with standards, nothing to do with TSDSI directly, but has a very important role to play. And I think Sir Rajaraman was at the helm of DOT as secretary when all of this was being executed. So I think there's no question at all that his contributions in this 2-year period were pivotal in taking us forward on the journey which started approximately 10, 12 years ago. So once again, sir, thank you and congratulations. Thank you.
Can I ask Mr. Krishnan to please come and say a few words? Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you, Professor Paulraj, Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy, Mr. Mohan Ram, and my good friend and colleague of almost 35 years, or more than 35 years, Sri Rajaraman. I'm not at all surprised to be here in front of you today on an occasion to honor Rajaraman receiving an award. Long overdue, in my view, for the kind of work that he's done over the several years in service. Probably in this auditorium, unless you have somebody who's known you from your school or college days, I don't think anybody would have known him longer. I've known him all of 35 years. We joined the Indian Administrative Service together. We served in the state of Tamil Nadu together in a number of assignments. We worked closely together over the past many, many years. And I can assure you that he's held in the highest respect wherever he has been. He's a man who is called upon when there is a true emergency or when there is something which needs to be cleaned up or something which needs to be dealt with. In the civil service, there are a set of people who find their uses every now and then. They're brought in when something needs to be cleaned up. And that was his reputation in different jobs that he's done. There is a story in Tamil Nadu of how he was brought in on helicopter to take over as a district collector in a district because there was work to be done. And likewise in many other occasions where his services were specifically sought for. And the other part of what he does is that, he always stands up for his convictions. If there is one person who has a courage of convictions, it is him. In any assignment that he does not back down. He does not sort of become flexible only because there is a request or a demand. And he has, as a result, suffered certain consequences over his career as well, but he's always borne them with equanimity and moved on and done whatever he needed to in every job that he did. And finally, almost as a crowning pinnacle of his career, when he was posted as Secretary Telecom in the Government of India, that probably brought him back to where he needed to be all these years, because at some part of his career, he had served in the DOT before he joined the Indian Administrative Service. And he is an electronics engineer by training, and therefore, he came back to the logical place where he needed to be. And he served in that position with a great deal of distinction from what I have heard from many people who interact with me now. There was a brief period where he held charge of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology as well as secretary in the ministry, and including what people there tell me in terms of his understanding of what needs to be done, in terms of the manner in which it needs to be approached. A person who gets into detail but doesn't get lost in detail. And people have told me that he spent a whole day in CERTIN's facility, the Computer Emergency Response Team India at their facility to understand what exactly they do. But then what he contributes to policy making and what he contributes to the final decision making on this is an overview. And likewise, what was done to make sure that Indian companies did well in the telecom space, to ensure that we have a trusted and verified mechanism of supply chain for electronics products, to make sure that there is an approach by which Indian companies are promoted in this space, are ideas which are continuing through and continuing to influence the way that various other projects and schemes are being designed within the government, and the priorities of the government, in a sense, continue to remain the same, and a lot of that is something that he's established. Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy, of course, spoke about what has happened in the telecom standards space and the work that has been done over the past many years. As Secretary Mighty, it's a matter of pride for me that the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology has also been involved in that entire process. They have supported some of the research programs in that space, and clearly we've benefited a lot. And we have played, like they say in all of these movies, the supporting actor cast. We've been part of that support in trying to do the best that we could in that space. Likewise, Dr. Professor Paulraj has been associated, and I have been meeting him for the past 3 or 4 years, again in different capacities, in order to look at how we can establish electronics manufacturing and particularly semiconductor manufacturing in the country, and how we can viably do it. He's been indefatigable in speaking to a variety of policymakers, political leaders, whoever would listen to him, to try and see how we can make a difference. And even at this age, earlier this week, we sat down with a detailed presentation on what his ideas are on how do we further promote the design ecosystem for semiconductors in the country. And I can assure him that many of the ideas are ideas which we are comfortable working with. Many of the ideas are very similar to ideas that people like Rajaraman have also sort of espoused earlier, and which we are putting together now. And definitely all of this, the contributions that all of them make, will not go in vain. They are things that we will get implemented, if not in full measure, at least in substantial measure, to make sure that it contributes to a certain degree of technological sovereignty and certain degree of technological autonomy in the country, which is extremely crucial in the electronic space, and more particularly and specifically in the telecommunications space. So today, I think it's a matter of great pride for me personally. You would have seen me click a couple of pictures. So those are already going viral in various groups that Raja and I share in common, so that my friends and colleagues know that he is being so honored today. I think for me, it's personally a privilege to have been invited for this afternoon's event. And it's a real privilege to be present here when a very dear friend of so many years is receiving a signal and very, very well-deserved honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sirs. May I now invite Mr. Rajaraman to kindly please give an acceptance speech. Thank you.
Professor Paulraj, Dr. Ramamurthy, Mr. Krishnan, Mr. Satish, and Mr. Mohan Ram, and distinguished members who are invited to this meeting. I can see a lot of my old colleagues as well. Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be here once again after a gap of almost a year to hear about what's happening in the telecom sector. Let me say that first of all, that the award that was presented here is really not meant for me as a person, because no single person actually ever makes a big difference. It's a system. I think there are a system of a lot of people within the department, outside the department, and from the market researchers, academicians, all of them have actually worked together for years. I just was kind of happy to be part of that, and maybe in some small way, I must have inspired a few people to actually work faster and better. So that is all at best. I think I could judge myself as having contributed to this, but I'm deeply honored for this recognition. So definitely, I've always believed that a civil servant must never expect bouquets, but he should expect brickbats, and that's the the norm for a civil servant. But nevertheless, I think it's a pleasant change. I think where the civil servants also get recognized. So I thank the Dr. Paulraj, Mr. Krishnan, Mr. Ramurthy, Satish, and Mohan Ramji for having said very kind things. Obviously, when you are in government, I think you are expected to deliver. I think so. I wouldn't say that I've done much more than what a civil servant is expected to do. Obviously, a country like India requires a lot of work to be done by everybody, including the civil service. Secondly, I would like to congratulate TSDSI. I think it's been a momentous 11th year perhaps, right? I think maybe in a few days from now, on 7th of January, I think you will be turned 11. So, which is a great step forward. It's a great experiment, because I think I can still see only a few, maybe less than a dozen countries which have their own standards development organization, and India is one of them, which I think is a very proud thing. So, in 7th January of 2014, I think you were born. I think so. This is, obviously a lot of work must have gone behind it. And at that time, I think the telecom secretary was Mr. Faruqi. I think so. I think maybe at this point of time, and the good work that the industry and I think Professor Ramurthy's contribution to that has been immense. I think he and several others who have actually pioneered this trip of turning an idea into a real working organization. So my congratulations to TSDSI and all the researchers, like Professor Ramurthy, the people from the industry like N.G. Subramaniam, Mr. Satish Jamatagni, and many others who have actually worked to bring the industry together, and also many colleagues from the Department of Telecommunications, including Mr. Patak, Mr. Kishore Babu, and the many others who have actually worked hard in actually getting all people together. So it's a great start and definitely a long way to go. I am currently the chairperson of the International Financial Services Centers Authority, an offshore financial center in the city of Gandhinagar. It's India's only financial center. It's located in SEZ, and the work that I do, that we do in the IFSC is to actually to look at how we can raise capital for India's 2047 journey, in terms of debt, equity, or any kind of financial service. So today, a lot of these financial services or financing, till a few years back, was happening largely people had to go to Luxembourg or Sweden or to Singapore or to Hong Kong or Dubai to raise money or to access financial services. Today, a lot of that actually happens in GIFT City, thanks to the legal, regulatory, and tax architecture that have been put in place by the government of India. So today we are in the start of a very important. I think the last 2 years, I think since the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned the thought of Viksit Bharat at 2047, a lot of work has gone into how to architect that movement towards 2047. So the question that gets asked is, what are we all doing about it? What do we need to get there? I think so far, the last since 91, when the liberalization started, a lot of work has been done to make India open, a lot of liberalization in terms of delicensing, open economy in terms of welcoming foreign investment. All that has happened. In the last 10 years, the financial sector reforms have actually been very intense. Sectoral reforms in many sectors also have been intense. So a lot of ground has been covered. But the next 25 years, if you have to become a developed country, means that we have to do a lot of things very differently. And one of the things I think which is probably relevant to this group of people is that I think 2047 will not be a reality unless there are champions from India. There have to be manufacturing champions from India. There have to be service champions from India. Already we have service champions from India. The TCS and the Infosys of the world are actually champions in the world. But if you look at the manufacturing sector and the technology sector, I think there aren't many people who can qualify for that citation. So therefore, I would say that the real challenge is to how to transform the mid-sized companies, and maybe the large companies in India into global giants. I think that is going to be the biggest challenge. And I see a few of the companies here actually taking that steps towards the direction, which is, I think, commendable. It's going to be a very difficult task because the global marketplace is a very intensely competitive marketplace, and people come with very deep pockets for both marketing as well as for in terms of technology development. So so I would see that in telecom, I think our journey would have been kind of fructified, or it would have achieved its goal if at least one or two of our companies actually become global giants. I think if one or two companies become a competitor to some of the global telecom manufacturing giants. So I think that is where I think it is towards the direction that I think we must actually work. While there may be many other small companies, SMEs and mid-sized companies which will actually join the race, I think creating one or two large champions in India, I think, is going to be a very important task. And I see a few of them in the race. I hope that they develop the scale and the capacity to face the global economy head on. If you look at the global internet economy in terms of which is also in terms of data, or so on so forth, the India's journey has been quite good, in the sense that we are one of the marketplaces where data is the cheapest, I think, by all counts. Even at such low prices, I think the growth in the economy, growth in the use of digital and technology has actually been growing by leaps and bounds. And thanks to the availability of mobile infrastructure in this country, I think today the financial infrastructure, digital infrastructure is also riding on that, leading to a lot of very positive multiplier effects in the economy. Now, coming back to TSDSI, I think TSDSI's role, I think, has actually evolved, with a lot of effort happening in standards development. It's a very, very difficult task. I can well understand the difficulty that we are in. So, if I may say a few things here, which I think we need to work on very intensely over the next few years, is obviously, if you want to develop technology out of India, I think this has been the challenge. The only way is to actually to ensure that we produce more PhDs. I think unless we have the raw material for technology development in the country, I think we can't expect to be there. So we need to actually maybe increase the number of PhDs in deep tech by maybe 10-fold, maybe 100-fold. I think Mr. Krishnan probably is doing that in the semiconductor sector. But I'm sure in telecom sector also we did a lot of work in reaching out to universities and actually speaking to them, etc. But I think there has to be a concerted effort by the government of India, and I'm sure that a lot of efforts have happened. But I think the movement towards should be to how to scale up the number of PhDs in deep tech. The second thing is obviously raise public funding in R&D, and that is something with between the various arms of the government. A lot of work has been done. In telecom, for instance, I think we launched the Telecom Technology Development Fund from out of the USOF. And in the first year, I think we were able to give grants for a number of very large test beds, which I think is been a step forward. Similarly, I think MeitY runs a lot of R&D programs. Now, the government announcing the Anusandhan National Research Foundation is expected to actually to deliver more amount of public funding to both the private sector as well as to academic institutions. So the public funding has to expand to. If you look at technology, I think we need to probably have 6G test beds. I think I'm sure that the 6G Alliance must be working on that. But I guess we should have some of the 5G test beds perhaps turned into a 6G test bed. So since we have an operating model already in IIT Madras, and that should certainly happen. Similarly, I think if you look at the private funding of research, I think for several years, I think this has not been the case. But I am very happy to see that Geo companies like Airtel, TCS, Tejas, and so many other companies actually putting a lot of money into basic research, which is absolutely very, very important. But if you look at the work that needs to be done, I think the ground that has been covered by competitors in the world market, it's actually mind-boggling. In fact, today morning I just looked up. I was curious, so I looked up there's an interesting database called Grey Bee. I think which puts out a database called Insight. So I was just going through them. They have a country-wise comparison especially on various sectors. So one of the things which struck me was that I think if you look at the large corporations, I think it's the large corporations research. Now research outcomes actually drives the product development in the market. It's obvious, it's no brainer. So if you look at China, for instance, Haier last year did about 20,000 patents. Huawei from the telecom sector did about 12,000 patents. Japan, Toyota, I mean, it's an auto company, did about 8,700. In India, for instance, the largest number of patents were not filed by a technology company, but by a fashion apparel, this thing called Sabyasachi, I think so, with 700 patents. The next, I think the technology company I could find is TCS with about 416 and Jio, surprisingly, with about 193. So, if you look at the leading technology giants in the world, or the countries which lead in technology, I can see that it is the corporations which actually lead the battle. I think if the large corporations put money for R&D on the table, they develop patents, they develop products, and I'm sure that I think this country will go forward. And I'm sure that this is somewhere I think the government needs to think about how to incentivize companies to do more. I think this is perhaps a challenge that we need to address. So I would see that going forward. I can see early shoots in the form of companies like Jio, TCS, etc., spending money on developing products and filing patents and so on and so forth. The another thing which I remember having discussed. I think in fact Mr. N.G. Subramaniam is not here, but I think we used to have some conversations around how the organization structure of some of these large companies actually had a vacuum in the sense that I think standards development or participation was never a focus area. I think he was also saying that. And after the work that we did jointly with BSNL, I think C.Dot plus TCS and developing the 4G stack, the thought process came about how to create a standards organization within some of these private companies. I think so. TCS, for instance, he was telling that was setting up its own standards group, because standards is a long-term game, right? I think it doesn't happen. It's not like a marketing game where you do a product and then go away. I think standards is a long-term game where you do invest in research, then you develop patents, then the patents you have to participate in the global standards bodies, and then see whether they can be converted to SCPs. And so the journey is a very long journey. So the people who are in the game stick around for decades, I think, because that's what happens. I see in many of these standards bodies, the people who are there from many other countries have been around in these meetings for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. So therefore, I guess it's time for corporations to actually set up a group for standards participation and develop this group over a long time, have a long-term vision of what that needs to be done. The another area which perhaps also need to be looked at is in terms of product development, is that when you have a smaller patent base in India, obviously then we need to rely on the standards essential patents of other countries, other corporates in other jurisdictions. Obviously, the pockets that our SMEs and our product companies have is very, very shallow. So therefore, it is necessary that perhaps government needs to look at institutions like setting up a sovereign patent fund. I think this idea has been around for some time on how to get some of our mid-sized companies access to some of the patents on FRAND terms. I think it's a difficult task, because some of the competitors, obviously will make life difficult for you to access those patents, which are required to develop a wholesome product. So therefore, a policy development to ensure that I think the mid-sized companies are able to access the SCPs on FRAND terms is something which is very, very important, and the government has a very important policy role to play. Another thing which is work in progress in government is obviously the Make in India. We should also not look at Make in India, as Krishnan referred to just now. It's also about design in India. Unless people design the product, make the patents here, and then go for SCPs, and then develop products around it, obviously I think we are not going to be a technology leader. So therefore, it's very important that I guess that we need to have programs that support design as well, I think. So we, in fact, launched a couple of years back a design-linked, production-linked incentive scheme. So many other departments also have come up with similar schemes. So I'm sure that I think the emphasis on design, supporting the private sector for design is absolutely very, very important. And the last few things which I wanted to say is also the standards participation. I think this is also something we've often have found, I think in our discussions with TSDSI, that small companies, tech startups, which often struggle for, I think to make revenues, often find it difficult for themselves to participate in standards, global standards development organization meetings, like for instance 3GPP or something like that. So TSDSI has played a very important role in supporting such startups in participating in these bodies and pushing their patents to become standard essential patents. So this exercise requires a lot of funding support from the government, and I'm sure that the TSDSI has been accessing government funding support. we actually need to pursue and get more funding for tech startups to actually to play this very important role at the global level. And finally, I'll stop by saying that the role of the Standards Development Organization is now, TSDSI has grown to be quite wholesome. You have a role to play in spurring research in academic bodies, in spurring researchers to actually often what I find, I still remember a few of these conversations. For example, there's a researcher I spoke to, a couple of years back. He accessed a research grant and he produced a product which is probably, I remember, an optical transceiver or some such thing, which he had developed. But then I think he had to move on to another project. Therefore, he let the project kind of lapse. So what happens is that in our system, I think there needs to be this relay race. I think where an academician develops an idea up to a particular point, and thereafter, I think the idea is picked up by a startup or by a SME or a company, and then he takes it forward into commercialization. So this relay race of the product development has to be a joint race where academicians, the industry have to work together. So this connecting the dots in India has been a pretty difficult exercise. So I often find that when you propose research projects, sometimes academic institutions tend to do it on their own, which I think is not a good idea. I think right from day one, I think inducting the industrial organizations into the research projects absolutely will actually do a lot of good in actually making the project more practical and more market oriented than before. So I've seen that exercise being done in a few research projects in which we had played a role in funding. And we expect that this collaboration and participation should actually be one of the topics for TSDSI to take up and ensure that these connections are much more intense as time passes by. So with these few words, I'll stop here, and I'll thank you very much for this honor, which is really not mine. So I think it entirely belongs to this ecosystem. So we have a long way to go, I think, and miles to go before we sleep. So let's all resolve that I think India's 2047 journey will happen on stronger connects between the industry and the academic institutions, and stronger connects between the academic institutions, industry, and government. I think government research bodies, I think government institutions like DOT, CDOT, maybe Anusandhan National Research Foundation, and so on and so forth. Let's hope this 2047 journey actually results in global Indian champions emerging out of it. And I can foresee that because I see a lot of these champions sitting here, including Satish and many others. Kiran Kuchi, for instance. I think I remember several names with whom he had interacted for over the last several years. So let's hope that we'll see many of these people emerging with products and large investments in R&D. Thank you very much, I think.
Thank you, sir, for those very inspiring words and also giving a roadmap of what TSDSI should be doing. We've made a note of that. Before we move into the next session of the function, may I request all of you to please kindly pose for a photograph. Thank you. Thank you, sirs. And please stay back on the dais, sir. There's a release of some white papers and presenting of standards, which we'll be honored to present to you. We now move to the next part of our program, which is release of a white paper, a recently developed white paper on quantum communications. We're very honored to have the dignitaries, Professor Paulraj, Professor Bhaskar, Mr. Krishnan, Mr. Rajaraman, Mr. Satish Chamdagni, and our Director General, Mr. Mohan Ram. We would like to present the white paper on quantum communication, which has recently been developed by TSDSI, and request Professor Paulraj to kindly release the paper on behalf of TSDSI. So this white paper, as you know, quantum communications is a key technology. It's been identified on TSDSI's standardization roadmap as a key area. We set up a technology roadmap item proposal forum to work to study ongoing activities in the quantum communication space. May I present, please present the paper, the white paper to everybody. So this white paper delves into technology, advancements, emerging and futuristic use cases, region-specific customizations, implementation and deployment issues. It briefly describes prevailing standards, technologies, standardization activities elsewhere, and government initiatives. It identifies standardization gaps and gives recommendations for standardization activities, open sourcing, research, and IP development. This white paper was contributed to by 58 experts from TSDSI member and non-member organizations, a very large number of people who met regularly, almost on a weekly basis, over the past several months to come out with this white paper. And this initiative was led by Dr. Manjunath Ramachandran Vipro in this initiative. I don't know whether Mr. Manjunath is there in the room. Okay, so I think he might be online. So a big round of applause to the 58 contributors and the paper. This paper is now going to be available on the TSDSI website. The QR code is given here. Thank you. We would also like to present, so please take your seats. There's some. We'd also like to take this opportunity to present some recently published technical standards of TSDSI. So the first one is a standard on cloud interoperability and portability. So as you know, cloud from different vendors are not interoperable, not necessarily interoperable, resulting in computing silos, leading to challenges such as vendor lock-in and barriers in developing inter-cloud applications, which could result in more value-added applications and services. Standards are required for cloud interoperability, data portability, compute and application portability, and security. Department of Telecommunications had mandated TSDSI to develop cloud interoperability and portability standards for India based on a recommendation from TRI a few years back. TSDSI has since then developed 3 parts of this cloud interoperability and portability standard, the latest being the stage 3 of the standard. Basically, the standard premises itself on the broker architecture concept using a set of APIs which interconnect between the elements that need to exchange data and address the issues around data translation as well. These standards address critical aspects like data portability, service migration, and cloud security in complex multi-cloud environments. It has immediate use in smart cities environment. The standards also cover architecture for interoperability for multiple use cases and APIs for the use cases, services discovery, management, etc. Presenting the, I think the documents have been submitted, presented to the, yeah, okay. This standard is also available on the TSDSI website. The next standard is on standardization of common data payload for adaptive traffic control system and intelligent transportation systems. There is a need for a standardized common service layer which needs to connect to multi-vendor traffic controllers and other intelligent transportation system products. Personally, if you have, from my personal experience, if you have a car, let's say you're in the Hyundai system, you connect to the Hyundai cloud. You cannot connect to the Maruti cloud. So that is what this standard is talking about. Interoperable standard for getting these systems to talk to each other. So standardized data payloads are expected to facilitate integration of different intelligent transportation system products for comprehensive deployment scenarios. A few scenarios are listed below. For example, traffic signal controllers, intelligent parking management systems, emergency vehicle preemption systems, street light management systems, vehicle detection, counting and classification systems, air quality monitoring systems, and so on and so forth. Please present the standards. The third standard is on RIS-assisted communication systems, reconfigurable intelligent services, a new enabling candidate wireless technology for dynamically controlling radio signals between a transmitter and a receiver. RIS can potentially enhance both the spectrum efficiency, energy efficiency, cost effectiveness in coverage and sustainability, including energy saving of wireless networks. It also helps in interference management and supports applications such as joint sensing and communications. The TSDSI standard on RIS assisted communication systems specifies the architecture, interfaces, and mechanisms in an RIS assisted communication system. This standard is a first step to define the methods and procedures involved in the implementation of RIS. It will be followed by other standards on RIS, on which work has already begun in TSDSI. The standards, please present. And last but not the least, a generic relay architecture for 5G and beyond. Relays or wireless backhauls are used in scenarios such as cell densification, rural coverage, coverage extension in gap areas, including indoors and on-spot deployment through vehicles. This particular standard addresses existing limitations while utilizing existing 3GPP-defined network interfaces with minimal changes by making it more scalable and flexible with generic plug-and-play architecture having the following key features. It gives flexibility to use different radio technologies on access and backhaul links, such as LT, 5G new radio, non-3GPP access Wi-Fi, etc., across two interfaces of the relay node. It also supports multi-hop relays and mobility of user equipment and relay nodes and UAV-based relays. This particular standard is expected to enhance ease of deployment, enabling faster and reduced overall cost, especially for the rural broadband and PPDR applications. Present the standards, please. So thank you very much, sirs. We thought we'll take this opportunity of presenting the hard copies of the standards to you. There are some other standards in 6G and 5G and beyond and certain other areas that we are developing. And the progress is already there on the website. And as the standards get published, we do send liaisons to the various departments and all. Hopefully, in the next edition, we'll present some more new standards, relevant standards to you. Thank you very much, sirs, for this part. And I now request the dignitaries on the dais to please take your seats in the audience. I request Professor Paulraj to kindly stay back and deliver his address. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Rajaraman, Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy, Mr. McDonough, Mohan Ram, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. So it's a great honor to say a few words. So I'm going to be a little disorganized, but firstly, I want to respond to some of the comments that Mr. Rajaraman made. I completely agree with him and just highlight some of his comments. Then something else about, I'm not going to go into my feedback with the government on the semiconductor industry, on the fabulous side where I'm involved. But I'll just say a few thoughts I shared with Mr. Vaishnav yesterday. Is not new to us, but I think it's important. And finally, I did promise Mohan Ram will say something about AI, because that's a tsunami that's coming. It's going to change, whether we like it or not, our lives. Almost anything our plans today is probably going to be displaced, manipulated by this new wave. So we got to pay attention. So with that, I thought Mr. Rajaraman made some wonderful comments. And what I would say is this: is that one thing I've amply said is we have to build global companies. So there's no such thing as make in India for India. It just will not work. That will only lead to the ambassador car problems. So when we build an industry, we got to interact with the world, and the only way we can build global companies is we can do better than them. We compete against them, and we compete to win. And of course, I think if we do 100 companies, most will die, and that's how the world works. Typically, in China, we talk about 99% dying. In US, it maybe 95%, and it's going to be of that number. But only the fittest survive. It's a do or die, and those people who survive are going to be global. They will, Indian headquartered, but they can have R&D anywhere in the world, manufacturing around the world. But they become like the Intels or now the Nvidias, the new kid on the block. taking on the world and doing better than competition to survive. And of course, even those big giants like Intel become fallen angels because they did a few things wrong. And Pat Gelsinger is a very good friend of mine, and I feel sorry that he's a very admired person. But one Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks ago, there was a board meeting, and he was walked out of the company because he had not performed. So it's a brutal area, and I've been through 3 startups. It's brutal. So only a brutality will make us win. We cannot win it by hoping. It's a tough race. Other thing I want to mention is the only way we can get a ticket into this business is innovation. You can't say Mr. XYZ is doing that, we're going to do the same thing. There's no chance because everything is going exponential. You try and see what he's doing today. By the time you catch up in 3 years, he's already gone 10x ahead. So you got to have innovation and ideas. It's only then you can win. That's the second thing. Third thing is all the things we do in our country, standards, committees, TSDSI, everything we do. Ultimately, the only one thing matters, revenue. If we're not in revenue, everything else is stock. And revenue means competing in the world and getting revenue. So it is. So we have to. All these things are important. The government policy is important. The standard system is important. Many things that we are doing in the country to help the ecosystem is important. But only reality, which is real, is revenue. Until we get the revenue, we're not there. So we have to get revenue, build companies in deep tech, which get the revenue. It means revenue in the global level. So ultimately, in my opinion, all the support we provide the ecosystem is ultimately to find those 2-3 entrepreneurs. I mean, there'll be many, but many won't be good enough. 2-3 guys who are truly brilliant, enormous tenacity, good business sense. That combination will take us to the top. So it's really about talent. In fact, today the big war between US and China is all about talent. Okay, with that, let me finish up my comments earlier, and then we'll talk a little bit about AI. So India's recent wireless accomplishments are amazing. I would thank all of you for what we have done. In technology, I think our contribution to 3GPP standards and the ITUR led largely, I think, by CVIT, Chennai, and there are all others. So that was a good thing on technology. The 5G base station, which was put together by IIT Madras and Bombay, I think, and some other IITs, that was another very nice achievement. And then, of course, our effort in the 5G in the LMLC, low mobility, large area variant, which I think we went through a fight, but finally, I think I'm glad we unified with the standard IMT 2000 2020, and it'll now and I think in release 17 is incorporated. I think good. So. And by the way, I mean, was involved in standards many years ago. The system, in some sense, is fair because it is a consensus of many countries. And even though I used to argue that some people, companies play dirty, ultimately, I think truth wins out. So I think I'm glad we took on that thing and made our impact and won out. So, and of course, also, I think a big achievement for us is BSNL's development of, Tejas development of 4G for BSNL being deployed, I think, a large number of base stations. It's old technology, but getting a large network to function at high quality and good KPIs is not easy. So all kudos to them. So in terms of delivery or the government setup, I think DOT has been a very effective very effective body. I mean, the telecom policy, the support to TSDSI, Mr. Rajaraman gave. Also, I mean, we did some good spectrum auctions. It wasn't written by controversies as before. So DOT is doing its job. And TRI, I think, is a very effective watchdog of the services enterprise to provide fair and safe services. And of course, I think the real champs are the operators, Airtel, Jio, who deployed networks with world-class metrics in terms of in terms of affordability, data usage, population coverage. I think we probably even our metrics beat that of China. So congratulations. So I think there are many people who contributed here, and on the government side, I think Mr. Rajaraman, we certainly noted that, and then on the in the research side, I'd like to recognize Kumar Sivarajan, Tejas CEO, Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy. Some of you may not know his name, Pluto Millet. He's the chief scientist at Chivit. He's been there many years, and he's, I think, been a great force. Professor David Kovilpillai, who actually had a very good job in US, came back to serve our country, and always, for me, Dr. Ramamurthy and David Kovilpillai are the stars at IIT Madras. So Aruna Sundararajan, I think, has got the award before, and she, in some sense, got me involved with India, so I have to thank my involvement with it to Aruna. Satish Chamagani, who brings an operative viewpoint, and many others, and of course also Dr. Neeraj Mittal, who's Secretary DOT. So, in some sense, our where we are today is where China was about 20 years ago. They just got the TD-CDMA standard approved in 3G. So 3G has three standards: the Chinese TD-CDMA, the wideband CDMA from 3GPP, and the TD. I think it is called TDMA, something like that, which is kind of European kind of thing offering, but that kind of died out. So mainstream was WCDMA, which we also deployed a little bit in India. But the TD-CDMA, Chinese, I used to tell them that this is old stuff, this is 1G or 1.5G. But they always said, this is our time, we have done this, so we want to pursue with it. So they pursued with it for about 20 years. But somehow that, because the leverage from which they created these huge ecosystems. Huawei came, ZTE, they had Xiaomi, and Oppo, all the phones that we use. So it became a huge presence in 3GPP. I mean, I think 40% of the IP in 3GPP was from them. So it started off with this, getting the standard stuff done first. And one of my students, that's how I got involved, Guanghan Shu, was the key to this, and a Chinese student. So I think we are in that sense where China was some time ago. So now, as Mr. Rajaraman pointed out, it's all about, I would say, get the revenue. Build companies which compete and win and get to revenue. And of course, they need a lot of help, and that's what we are here for. So let me say a little bit about the history of wireless. The first wireless link, I believe, was 1905 in Calcutta. I don't have full record, but it was set up by a Marconi company. So that brings up to Guglielmo Marconi, and there's a society called Marconi Society. I'm a fellow. So I, of course, even though I'm 80 years old, I never met Marconi. He passed away in 1935, I think. But I do know both his daughters. The first daughter was Dagna, and I first met her in 1895 at Stanford when we had a global celebration of the first demonstration of wireless by Marconi in his house called Villa Grafoni near Bologna. I've been there many times. And so there's an event at Stanford, or near Stanford, and she was there. And we were just starting our journey on MIMO, and I was saying that it's proving to be difficult because a lot of people didn't agree with it or against it. And then she only said, "No, Paul, you must start a company. Only then you commercialize it, try and commercialize it. That's the only time the world will believe you. Till that time, no one will." Because that's what our father did. Marconi was an engineer, and he's certainly not a researcher or a scientist, but he was a great entrepreneur. And only through his entrepreneurship, I think today the fact we have 900 million, phone users in our country, smartphone users, ultimately goes back to the fact that he built this Marconi company and spread it around the world. So, this other daughter is called Princess Electra. I met her recently in Bologna. So, actually, the Marconi had two wives, and there were some divisions in the families. And this time, all the family got together when I was there, and so the Marconi's 150th birthday was this year, so there was a big celebration in Italy, and I'd gone for that. The other big name in wireless is our own name, J.C. Bose. And we know that he was much more a scientist. And some of you should look at the letters between him and Marconi, and the letters between him and Rabindranath Tagore. He was very much a scientist, and actually, after all this work in millimetric waves, he went to Cambridge and became much more a bio guy. And but amazing person. And one of the things I wanted to do was get a medal instituted in his name in IEEE. So, but I couldn't raise the money. I did try. I wrote to some people even here, but finally, someone called Professor Shankaran in IIIT Bangalore came across a name called Mr. What's his name? I'll tell you. I'll come back to it. Yep. Let me come back to me. But he was a scientist in his own Bengali name, scientist in his own right, but actually made a lot of money in real estate in Los Angeles. I think he lived in the Hollywood area. So he has millions of dollars. And Shankaran discovered that he's been giving money away. So he wrote to him and he said, he'll give it. So $800,000 was given, and IEEE has instituted the medal, J.C. Bose Medal. And the first winner of the medal is Mr. Sergio Ono, who is I think, is member of the ITU right now, board, but he's also the chief standards officer and formerly the chief technology officer of NTT Docomo. So I used to go there very often. I don't remember meeting him, but he's getting his award, first Bose Medal I think in April or May in Tokyo. I hope government sends somebody for that event, because it's in honor of Bose. But it's also important that we now find somebody from India to win that medal. So I'll be in touch with all of you to see how to sponsor one of you for that medal. So I think India's journey in wireless has begun, thanks to many of you here. And so right now, it's been a lot of work, a lot of frustration also, but a lot of work. But we are where we are today. And I think in the beginning of the threshold, but we got to convert all this into products and revenue, innovation, persistence, and we have a good role model here. I think the companies which have done, the company that we need to sort of look at is China. They converted, like us, started from a very small base but grew it. So we too can do that. So with that, let me say a few words about AI. So the genesis of this presentation was, I've been, most of you may not know, but my love has always been mathematics. So in 1969 to 71, for 2 years, I was at IIT Delhi, and I did some very exotic work in mathematics of using stochastic calculus in some area. And those days, I used something called Ito calculus. Anybody heard of Ito calculus? Anyone? It's all the quants today. Anybody's heard of Black-Scholes equation? Black-Scholes option pricing equation. You use Ito calculus for that. So, but those days, the people thought in EE one can use it for signal estimation and prediction. All of us heard of Kalman filtering. Kalman filtering is when you want to predict or estimate at this point, the current time, the signal which is corrupted by noise. If a signal is Gaussian, you only have to estimate the mean and the variance, and Kalman filter does that. So you have a dynamical equation for the signal, and noise is really additive white Gaussian noise, and then you have that Kalman filter. But if the signal is not Gaussian, then you got to propagate the density function. And there are many approaches to it, but one is the diffusion approach. And so those days there was the Ito calculus and Ito's lemma. They could forward propagate, but I adopted some theory from Kolgomrov in Russia and offered a backward propagation method. And so that became very famous within that small community. It's a very rarefied community. And Stanford was very interested. That's why I finally landed back at Stanford. But it turns out that something in AI today is using those ideas, so I'm trying to explore it. So there's somebody at Oxford who works on it. So I gave a talk at Oxford, and with that talk, I sort of embellished that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in AI today, and I hope I can find that. It's absolutely, whatever we look at it, is unbelievable.
Okay, can I project this somehow? Can I project it?
So I'll just ask somebody to help. Can I get a copy of this?
Copy?
Or
You
we
mean,
can just,
you mean you want to
yeah, we'll just have it connected.
connect?
Rajesh, can you come here? We'll just connect this laptop for the presentation. Or if you can give this laptop there and they'll run it for you.
That also is fine. Yeah, that's also fine. Only thing is, I'll tell you next slide. It comes up, right? I can look at the slides from here. It'll come there, right? So when you connect it, yeah. So I think you have to pay attention to all this because it's become a US-China show, and everything we touch today in AI seems to be trillions of dollars. And people are talking about the impact being as much as the invention of fire or the wheel. That may be hype, but whatever you see in it is pretty mind-blowing. For example, I've tried, for example, if you give the top grade papers in the International Math Olympiad, I can't do any of those questions. I mean, it's impossible. Certainly are not my age. Maybe youngsters, it's tough. It solves it. With JEE math paper, it will solve it in a few milliseconds. I remember that day I was playing with my grandkids. I asked the AI, I think Anthropic or maybe Gemini, what is the lat long of the Mount Everest peak? And it gives it to you. And he said, write a poem about that. And he writes a poem. What is the history of discovery? And some of you may know that that time the Survey of India was surveying the peaks. And they thought the highest peak was in Latin America. But when they were looking at it, they already seen, I think, Kanchenjunga and K2. And then somebody called Sikda, I think I was doing the calculation of the triangulation, and he found it was 29,000, highest they've seen. So he ran to his boss saying, I think we have found the highest peak in the world. And it was named after Mr. Everest, who was the former Director General of Survey of India, but somehow it became Everest. So that was the story. And Sikda's own history is also fairly well known. It brought out all these things. I mean, I remember vaguely, but it picked up, it scrapes the internet all over the world and puts it together. Or then what is the gravitational force at Mount Peak Everest? I know it's a little lower than here, but a lot of complicated theory. It produced that. You say, okay, give me a panoramic movie going around Everest. It goes into these Google databases and produces the mountains. I mean, it's going to design gas turbines for us. It's going to change our lives enormously. It writes code today, and this is happening every 3-4 months. Americans thought we are ahead, but we find Chinese are catching up. Some of their models are better than what we have. So it is. It's come up. Okay. So with that, let me run this forward. So I gave this in. Fine. Okay. So my own connection to AI was after my 2 years in PhD at Stanford at IIT Delhi. I was back in the Navy, and only some of you were alive at that time. But we had a war with Pakistan, and that ship, INS Kukri, was a Blackwood class ship from England, but we had acquired. And she was sunk by a French submarine, Daphne class, which was Pakistan Navy submarine, on December the 7th, 1971. And we lost 200 people. So the Navy, I was always the math guy in the Navy, so they said, can you do something about the sonar? Because we use that sonar on many other ships. So I was flown next morning to Bombay, and there's a long story, there are books about it, but then I redesigned that sonar, the electronics of the sonar, using integrated circuits that were available those days, low level. And that dramatically improved the performance of the sonar. But one of the things I used there was the Wittrow-Half adaptive filtering algorithm, the learning filter, and that went into service. So that was my first interaction with that area. And Wittrow's was later my colleague at Stanford, where I got to know him well. We shared some doctoral students together. And Ted Hoff, that algorithm called Wittrow-Half algorithm, was the designer of the first Intel chip, 4004 chip. So I had Ted Hoff and Federico Fagin, so I know both of them pretty well.
But this part of learning filters, adaptive filters, kind of stayed away from because when AI took off and neural network took off, it was deep neural networks, and this was only one layer. Then later on, I had gone to Stanford to spent 2 years. I came back and I started the lab, the AI lab for DRD. It's called CARE. It's a large campus. When I did it, it's only a pretty small lab. Then I was supposed to go the LCA program, and that finally got me enough trouble that I went back to Stanford. And then sometime in 2013, I did a company called RASA for anomaly detection of large Wi-Fi networks. And like University of Washington, Seattle has 22,000 access points. So to find out where things are going wrong, to detect that, and then to do root causing was the goal of the company. But we found that we couldn't get enough data to train that network. We used a technique called support vector machine. It is pre-DNN area, but it's a fairly good technique. But it turned out that we couldn't get enough data. So there was a company called HP Aruba, which is a very dominant company in this space. Cisco and HP Aruba are the two dominant companies in enterprise Wi-Fi. So they bought my company, and I had a very good team. So our tools finally became the tools of HP today. So at that time, I learned a little bit about it. But now I'm a board observer in a few AI chip companies, and so I keep in touch. Okay, so the timeline of AI is, before 1950s, the long history goes back to the Arab astrolabe, Charles Babbage, lots of things. But then in 1957 or 57, somebody called John McCarthy at Stanford, who used to live actually down the road where I live now, but he passed away by the time I moved into this house. He had a conference at Dartmouth College. He invited a lot of people, Rosenblatt and Minsky and others, and they invented the word artificial intelligence. And they initially was thinking about semantics. They thought, how do you understand the meaning of words? So they're focusing on semantics a lot. And of course, that went nowhere. Then there was some move towards expert systems, and that also went nowhere. But I wanted to say, in this case, there's somebody called Professor Raj Reddy. So he is one of the big names in AI. His name is not the same as Feigenbaum, McCarthy. He was McCarthy's student. Who else? Minsky, all the big names in the 60s and 70s. Did his PhD at Stanford, then became a professor at Carnegie Mellon. Both of us regularly, we are both academics in China, so we normally used to meet in China. But we often meet at home also. He's right now in Bangalore, and yesterday when I met Minister Vaishnav, I said we should be using him because in China he's mobbed by the Chinese people. But not that he knows much about AI now, he's 87 years old, but he's mobbed because he's a father figure. And here we don't use him. So now that we should do AI and we should really get him involved. He just told me today that he's going off to New Zealand, but please make sure we give him some big title and get him here. He's such a big name. Okay, so by 75, things didn't work out. So basically, we had an AI winter. NSF, I remember NSF, DARPA wouldn't fund AI. They said this thing doesn't work. So then, from 95 to about 2012, there was steady progress. People began to realize that adding hidden layers helps a little bit, and so the activation function was improved. A few things began to improve, and basically people realized that over-parameterization, I won't go into details, was the key. So we saw something like Watson, the DARPA challenge. Things began to happen. But 2012, the key idea came of deep neural networks. And that was, three people are generally, Jeff Hinton, Toronto, Yoshua Bengio, who comes here often. I don't know whether he's come to IIT Madras, Bengio? Yeah, but he has been to India. And the third person is Jan LeCun, who's at NYU, who I know well. So Jan LeCun was the first production result. He built a tool for reading the handwritten addresses of letters and automatically, wrote letters. What it cannot read, like 5%, it will go to a human being or go to a more complex AI machine to get it done. So that was in production about 2014. So the first success. Then, of course, the whole range of what we call a discriminate AI happened. Face recognition, machine translation, all that came and been a big success. So that's the second golden age AI started. And so deep neural networks, and then, and it's all in this class of discriminative AI. So and then people began to look at what is called a generative AI, which is saying, instead of merely looking at data and saying, interpreting it, can you generate new things? Can become creative? The generative AI, and there's something called large language models. ChatGPT is one of them. So people can look at it from recursive neural networks, LSTMs. Nothing was really working till a group at Google came up with this idea of transformers and attention. I'll mention that, and that broke the dam. So now there are today, the total investment in silicon in the world today is $102 billion a year. 102 billion. 14 billion went into startups this year. 14 billion. Most of them are going to die, of course. So people are just talking about hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars because they think this is going to become huge. And the people running the race is the United States and China. So my contention is we better join this thing because this is huge. Okay, human intelligence, I won't go into it. So the golden age, 2012, deep neural networks, new generative AI, and the pioneers were Hinton, Bengio, LeCun, Fifi Lee at Stanford, Andrew Ng at Stanford. We've already had some very good people at Stanford, but they were an older generation, but Fifi and Andrew are new ones. And in 10 years later, 2022, generative AI has come, large language models, and here these need such large resources, all teams. The Google team, Facebook, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Chinese have Baidu, Alibaba, a fair amount of stuff going on. So just a little bit of mathematics. So in generative AI, much of what we do today in airport, face recognition, handwriting, speech recognition, which all become routine, is based on kind of building boundaries between objects, and normally it is trained, and so building these boundaries is how it works. While generative AI, it builds density functions, so it's a different model altogether. So in AI in production, image classification, object detection, speech recognition. So these are all in production. They work really well. Medical diagnosis, for example, it reads X-rays and MRIs better than human beings. Language translation is routine, and there are a lot of opportunities for India to use this more, particularly because in rural villages they don't know English, and English is a repository for a lot of knowledge, certainly in STEM. So many things we've done. I think there are a lot of companies working this also. And the big factor in generative AI is called convolutional neural networks. That came from Jan LeCun. I won't go into the details, but almost much of current AI, the old AI, is all CNNs. And for example, the Waymo self-driving cars, Google company, now it's running 200 taxis in San Francisco. You see them around, completely self-driven. And the total number of parameters it processes is 200 million parameters. It seems large, but you'll be shocked at what Gen AI is doing. So how do DNNs work? We know exactly how it works, what we do with it. We have this layers of neurons, and each neuron sends inputs to other neurons. We apply weights, we apply a bias, then we go through a nonlinear function like either ReLU or softmax or tan, hyperbolic tan. And then it progresses many layers, and we do back propagation. But the dimensionality of the system is in thousands of dimensions. And it finally does amazing things. How does it really do it? We don't understand. One intuition is that in that space, it creates partition. It creates more partitions than the number of atoms in the universe. So incredible. It never actually draws this partition, but it does create them virtually. So it has this kind of phenomena where we know what we do, but we don't know how it works. It's amazing. So generative AI is different. So I mentioned about working with my grandchildren, about you ask any question, it answers for you. Sometimes it does get it wrong, but sometimes it does help a lot. So it has two key ideas: transformers and attention. Transformers is, for example, let's say we're only talking in two-dimensional space. Normally these dimensions are 10,000 dimensions. So, for example, stew, fish, lamb, bear, horse, cycle, car. Well, what it does is these are vectors, and you can see some of these vectors are classified are closer to each other because they are all food. Otherwise, they are animals. Otherwise, they are modes of transportation. So, for let's say there's a table could be a vector embedding in generative AI. The table will have thousands or tens of thousands of attributes it associates with it, and that's how that is used actually through transformers to do all what it does. And so in Gen AI, there's large language models. Anthropic, QWQ is from China, is pretty good. Gemini, Llama, ChatGPT, and so on and so forth. Image generation, some of you may have used it. Imagen, DALL-E. Video generation, the Sora, which where you just give a prompt and it will generate a video for you. Say, okay, show me a prompt of me riding a horse. It will show you a movie, but you riding a horse. Reasoning, there's DeepSeek from China, Cholesterol from France. Also, I think Google has come out with something pretty good. In math, there's DeepSeek, AlphaMath, Marco 1, that's Chinese. These can solve math Olympiad problems very easily. Industry applications like AlphaFold for folding proteins. Forge is, I think it's, I forget, for Autodesk Fusion, Baidu AI, many others. So every 3 months, something is coming out. Investments are just hundreds of billions of dollars. And at this space, the metric here is, we all heard of Moore's Law. Moore's Law was doubling every 18 months. Here, the metric is joules per token is doubling every 5 months. So in 5 years, we're talking about a factor of 1,000. So where is the world going? I don't know, but it's pretty amazing. So it uses ideas of vector embedding, transformers, attention to do it. I won't go into it, latent space. There's also another thing for image called diffusion models, which I'm trying to figure out whether there's any connection with my thesis and this. I'm not sure. Here it uses a lot of mathematics. Fundamentally, it takes a picture. Let's say you train it for people riding horses. You've shown thousands or millions of those pictures. It takes that picture, the first clean picture, adds a little bit of noise, and then tells a neural network, the DNN, to estimate, denoise it, remove the noise, because it is given the original picture. So he said, you don't subtract it, but he said, you do something here, manipulate it to remove the noise. So it does it, then it keeps on adding more and more noise, till finally the picture becomes completely noisy. And then you can go backwards and you denoise it, and this time you go a prompt saying, show me a cat riding on this horse. It'll now come up with a picture of a cat riding on the horse. So this is how it works. The stochastic calculus, I think, doesn't work, but I'm looking at it. I don't think I'll succeed. But it's the math is pretty amazing, but what it does is even more amazing. So again, how does it work? Unexpectedly strong results on various tasks, discovers hidden patterns on large data sets, the implicit regular. It's mind-boggling what it does. So we don't understand why it does it. They call it emergent properties. Maybe the brain works that way, but this is a very new kid on the block. Performance scaling, if you go back a few years, you find that, let's say maybe face recognition took 6 years from initial to sort of beat human performance. Today, something starts within 3 months, it's beating human performance. So it's getting faster. Infrastructure, typical AI server power today around the world is about 15 terawatt hours. And in 23, and it tripled in 1 year. And it needs my triple in 1 year. And if you go at that speed, in 5 years, we'll be using more power for AI than all the power consumed in the world. Already, I think it's using more power than entire Delhi, but all the power consumed in the world in 5 years. Of course, we can't afford it. It's going to do damage to the climate. So everything here is exponential. So, and the capital expenditures in AI infrastructure today is $200 billion, but it'll go to trillions very soon. So, again, hard to understand it. AI chips, there are lots of metrics, I won't go into it. But the leaderboard, NVIDIA A100, I think it came out B100 recently. That chip, they probably get it manufactured for $500. They sell it for $25,000. 95% margin, because nobody can beat them, so they can charge what they want. Google TPU4, tensor processing unit, AMD Instinct M120, Intel Habana, so on and so forth. And there are many more companies. I know one or two of them, smaller ones, which I'm involved with. And basically, China has at least 1,000 startups. I'm sure 999 is going to fail. But that's how it works. The world works by failures, because if we don't fail, you're not innovating. So you need that. Global economic impact. Right now, it's pretty small. But in 10 years, they say it'll be about $10 trillion a year. But by the way, the impact of wireless today is already about 5.7 trillion, because everybody has a phone in the hand, we can access the world. So wireless proved to be a very, very important technology. But so a little bit about the platform revolutions. So the PC era came around 1983, the time I landed at Stanford. So we had the PC, IBM PC and the Apple Macintosh. And that spread, not every home, not every hand, but it spread a lot, and it actually started increasing the GDP of the world. So that came from the microprocessors invented about 20 years earlier, at 1974, at Intel by Ted Hoff and Frederick Fagin. Then the next thing for broadband wireless came from an invention called MIMO, which was 91, was the first patent, and it took about 14 years before it entered WiMAX a little earlier, but entered LTE and Wi-Fi in 2008, 14 years or 15 years. And that was a huge jump in growth of the GDP, I think about 6-7% per annum. And India joined a little late, and we're still growing, and I think our growth is certainly, a lot of it is based on the fact that we have mobile era, we entered the mobile era, and we have access to it. The Gen AI, the idea was invested only 4 or 5 years ago. LLMs and by the way, MIMO has more than 450,000 papers and 570,000 patents. Gen AI, that paper, Google never filed any patents. Mostly, only very few papers, original papers, just 2 or 3. And it's already in production or getting into production. And people believe the AI era will be much bigger than all the earlier eras. So it's hard to believe. So I won't go into that. So the question that I ask myself, how does it work? We don't know how it works. We know what it does, but we don't know how it works. It's at very high dimensional spaces. We have no intuition. So is it going to lead to general AI like human beings? We don't know. But the only two players are US and China. My question is, who else? What about India? Talking to Mr. Vaishnav, I think we need to get together and see what we can do. It needs two things. It needs a lot of creativity. It needs a lot of talent people. And we do have them, but we got to make them more productive. They got to understand what people are doing. We got to build our own models. And we need large AI data centers. Even one data center is enough, because you got to test these models on those data centers cost 100 million today. So build a 100 million data center, get some really good youngsters around it, and enter the world and compete with these two guys. So with that, I'll stop. And anything more? I can take a couple of questions, perhaps, if we have time. So there's going to be a big change coming. So I think in the United States, I don't know about China, we don't know what we're going to do, but India is also will be faced with it. We can't block it, like cell phones couldn't be blocked. We can't block this. So I think we should join the race. Any questions? Yep. Take one from there. Go ahead.
Actually, in 6G standardization, one of the user scenario is AI and communication. The word written there is that AI should be the responsible AI. So how we are going to achieve that? That is the
So in fact, I put up saying no discussion of of societal effects. I didn't even say no discussion of applications also. Yeah, so this is a monster which has double-sided monster. And I think all countries are grappling with it. In some sense, technology is running ahead of what we can do about it. But obviously, we got to handle it. Uh, so, yeah. So, I would just say that we should not stop talking in India only about responsible AI. We better build some AI too. I mean, we should be some doers. But no doubt that will need some that. And I think it's something where all the people of India should be engaged in, not just the government. But it will restructure society in different ways, and some of it not going to be good. So we need to be careful. But Vishal, we need to get a lot more social thinkers to work around it, build some government policies, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
May I?
Yeah. One more question, maybe, and then we stop. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm Anil Tandon from Broadband India Forum. You've talked of so much of power consumption that the AI would need. How would that power requirement be met?
Yeah, so companies are buying up nuclear plants. Microsoft bought a nuclear plant in 3 Mile Island plant. They're taking up building because they start burning coal. Global warming going to get faster. But these guys have the money, so maybe build nuclear plants, but that will take time also. So nobody knows what to do. So in fact, this guy, what is his name? Schmidt, who was a former chairperson of Google, Eric Schmidt. He was saying that anyway, we're not going to meet our climate goals, so forget it, just go and burn more coal. That's not a responsible idea. So it's full of questions we don't understand. We don't know what to do. And there's no consensus also properly. But so it's a tough, I think it's a very double-edged sword. But on one hand, it can help a lot. It can certainly help India because India's a lot of people in India who do not have the necessary means for livelihood. We still have 18% who are desperately poor in our country. So I think it can help us reaching out to them and make a more equal society, a more inclusive society. All that it can do. But it's also going to change job structures and it's going to change our competitiveness. We do a lot of software software services that may disappear. We don't know. So it's going to change the world. But unfortunately in life, I know change is inevitable, but this is going to be very fast.
Sir, in your sense, how mature is the AI science? I ask this because there's always a paradigm. There is this example which is provided of a dragonfly which about 7 neurons. It can navigate itself from India to Africa and then back. Now, if you look at the AI, thousands of chips, too much of power consumption. At the end of the day, where do you think is for example, we had this neural nets and then there was an insufficiency of that found. Knowledge graphs are being mated into neural nets. There's a lot happening in the science. How mature in your sense is neural nets at all? Because there are these fundamental questions which are still lingering around.
So, first of all, we really don't understand how the brain works at some deep level, but we don't know the structure of human neurons, the synapses and all that. It turns out, I think we probably have 10 trillion neurons and about 100 trillion synapses. But even these ANNs are getting there slowly. But we do it at 20 watts of power. If we want to build that with these networks, it's going to take the entire world's power, one machine. So very inefficient. So a lot of effort to try and reduce the power. So the answer is this the right structure, what we use today, the idea of weights and biases and nonlinear activation functions? Well, that's what is working. So the answer to your question is, this is by no means perfect, but it's already doing things. So we're going to already be using it heavily. The discriminant AI is heavily used. So Gen AI will also get used. But the question is, by no means is it anywhere near efficient. But we have to find a way of doing it. We can solve the problem, we'll be the king of the world.
Sir, it's our privilege and honor to be hearing from you. Sir,
Yeah.
it's just a continuation from the previous question on the power supplies which is required for LLMs. Uh, Currently, LLMs require hundreds and thousands of GPUs to be able to be learned, to do their learning and to be able to use when billions of people are using the LLMs. India, how do we go about when there's a shortage of GPUs and we are not able to have maybe even, I don't know, a few thousand GPUs in India? How do we go about having our own LLMs and building them? China has been doing a good job in this particular front, being able to generate their own LLMs. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so I think we have to run faster. I mean, Mr. Jensen Huang comes here, he meets the Prime Minister. We should sit him down and tell him that you better do something for us. Otherwise, he's got, we've got to play ball, hard ball, and we don't do it. Even Sundar Pichai is coming very often, and but I would say forget about what we want in India is we want to build innovation here and scale the innovation to industrial levels. So innovation is what we need. And today we are buying from those guys. They got to help us build innovative companies and build more innovation in our universities. So I think the only handle that we have is we are a market. We're not yet a market for AI, but we are a market for a lot of other technologies. We buy hundreds of commercial jets. We import a lot of advanced medicines. We buy a lot of almost all electronics. So we have market power. So I have no easy question, but certainly to building even an AI server will be challenging because we can't get the GPUs. But maybe things will ease. And there's a general feeling that this rise of AI might taper off a little bit because much of these things require data for training. And these, at 400,000, 400 billion, 500 billion model sizes, there's no data left. It's seen every data in the world. So now people are talking about generating artificial data. I don't know what will that work. So I got a feeling that there'll be some slowing down, so that might give us opportunity. But I can tell you, forget about all this hardware and GPUs. I want people who can come up with some new ideas. If you have a new brilliant idea, that's what we need. It's all going to come from the human brain. We need some new ideas. And AI, the new ideas were transformers and attention. We look at it, very simple ideas, but it came out of a long background of looking at something called engrams and looking at LSTMs. So it can't be done by one person, but a group of people. So put our bright people together, and they'll make it happen. And thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you also for concluding that there is still room for human brain. The next ideas on AI may come from humans, like the transformer and attention. I'd also like to thank you for saying India needs to build companies in deep technologies that can get revenue. So that is a thought that we'll take back with us. I now invite Ms. Anuradha Agarwal, former member of the Outreach Committee, and working at the Prasar Bharati, to kindly come and deliver the vote of thanks. Ms. Anuradha Agarwal was also part of the jury panel that was part of selecting Mr. Rajaraman as the awardee. Anuradha is a member of the Indian Broadcast Engineer Service and is currently Additional Director General, Technology in Prasar Bharati Secretariat, New Delhi. She is responsible for overall management of a wide range of activities, which include policy formulation, planning, induction of new technologies, project implementation, monitoring, coordination of the entire Prasar Bharati network, encompassing studios, earth stations, and transmitters of AIR and Doordarshan, etc. Over to you, madam.
Good evening, everyone. Today's evening had been very inspiring to hear Professor Paul speaking about not only technology, but AI and how the world is going to be tomorrow that we see. It's indeed not only frightening when we see that human brain is going to be overtaken by AI. Some computer somewhere in the world will be, dictating terms to humans, how they will work and how they will think. So indeed, we need to have a deep thought about how we want the systems to work. So Indian human minds have to work towards that. That is what I feel. And thank you very much for being a part of this. First of all, Mr. Rajaraman, I would like to thank him for accepting the award that we have tried to confer on him. He is much beyond that. It's just a small token that TSDSI has, tried to convey their gratitude for his contributions to the development of TSDSI as a body in itself. And today, TSDSI has its own standing in the telecom world. Besides, Professor Bhaskar, another well-known dignitary in the field of telecom, we have been interacting with him a few times. I had the honor of talking to him, and he's a visionary in his own field. And he being here and being a part of TSDSI is an honor for all of us. Professor Mr. Krishnan, again, he is not only the Secretary Mighty today, but his entire standing in the field of the civil service is again, I would say, should I say about him? He's again, we should learn from how they work around the civil services. Indeed, they inspire us how the government systems with all their bonds tied together and still they're able to deliver. We should all learn from that. And it is a pleasure that he was here amongst us. Mr. Mohan Ram, he is guiding TSDSI to new heights today. And I would thank everybody present here for being a part of this ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam. With that, we come to the end of the Hall of Fame Awards ceremony. The Hall of Fame Awards, the website would get updated shortly. And I'd now like to invite you for a round of tea, and you can interact with the distinguished guests and Professor Paulraj and keep asking him questions that we couldn't accommodate during the formal session. Thank you very much. Please join us for tea.